This video is sponsored by Surfshark.
This is it. This is the best Android combo of 2025, and I can't lie, it has far surpassed my expectations for Google this year. I wasn't expecting to sit here and say I'd recommend these two products as my top picks, but that's exactly what's happened, so let's talk about that. Hey guys, I'm Ryan Thomas, and the Google Pixel 10 Pro XL is already a fantastic phone, one of the best on Team Green arguably, particularly if you live in North America. But what can elevate your Pixel experience? How about one of the best Android watches of 2025 as well? This is the Pixel Watch 4, and though I was already very impressed with the Pixel Watch 3 from last year, Google has proven that it could do far better than even that, with a model that feels like a genuine improvement, fixing some things and crucially upgrading the hardware. So let's dig straight into that after a quick word from today's sponsor.
What's almost become a staple of a mobile phone toolkit these days has to be a VPN. And not only does Surfshark work on our beloved Android, but also macOS, iOS, Windows and more, Surfshark lets you activate on unlimited devices and access servers across 100 locations worldwide. It not only allows you to secure your connection via tunneling your traffic, but it also lets you use websites that are typically geo-locked or even access content that's only available on other versions of services like Netflix. Or if you're a Premier League fan like me, being able to go on holiday and log into the normal services you typically watch the game on is so easy with Surfshark. There are different plans to suit your use case, so check out the link in the video description to see what works best for you and to get Surfshark for yourself. And a big thanks to Surfshark for sponsoring today's content.
Okay, so the Pixel Watch 4 at the time of writing is currently on sale, $50 off both the 41mm and the one I have here, which is the 45mm option. That makes this series a very compelling value proposition at $300 and $350 respectively for the Wi-Fi only models. Chuck in another $100 if you want LTE as well. And given we've already seen the Pixel 10 series smartphones on sale, you can grab a Pixel 10 and a Watch 4 for less than $1,000 combined. That's pretty sweet. Because I feel like the upgrades, not only from a technical standpoint, but also from a user experience one with the Pixel 10 series phones, can also kind of be felt here with the Pixel Watch 4 as well. I'll give you the big one up front. This watch can now do 2 to 4 days on a charge, depending on how you use your watch. Now, I must point out that I'm strictly talking about the larger 45mm variant here, because the battery in this thing is a whopping 40% larger than that in the 41mm SKU, so a big jump in pure capacity to 455 mAh. When I'm not training, not tracking any real exercise, this watch can do 3 and a bit days for me from start to finish, but when I chuck an hour-long workout in each day, it's closer to that 2-day stint time before I need to top up. And that's with the always-on display on and brightness in auto mode. That's pretty impressive for a watch that never really feels crazy bulky on the wrist, and I have some of the smallest wrists ever. And it's also worth noting that fitness extraordinaire DC Rainmaker has run his own testing on the 45mm variant, revealing a GPS runtime about 14 to 15 hours, although I'm not sure just how many ultra runners will be shopping for a Pixel Watch 4 over a dedicated sports watch, but it is good to know anyway. Google has upgraded the charging setup here, so instead of a bottom-mounted puck like we had in previous models, we now have these pins on the side of the watch that line up with the included cradle, which turns the watch into a little clock for your bedside table. I think that's pretty neat. It tops up from 0 to 100 in just over an hour, but actually myself and my Android police colleague Andy Boxall have found that on around a 15-minute stint on the dock, it will deliver about 50% of charge in the battery, which means that in a quarter of an hour on the dock, you should be able to get a full day's charge. So that's pretty good. The Pixel Watch's design in general is kind of divisive because it doesn't look too much like a traditional watch. I don't mind this design from an aesthetic point of view. I think it looks quite elegant and smooth, but I've never been a fan of them from an ergonomic perspective because the pebble-like shape and the fixed band out of the box make it sit quite uncomfortably on my wrist. So despite being smaller than my Garmin, the Garmin's relatively flat bottom and hinged strap help it feel like I'm not really wearing a watch at all. Of course, your mileage is most certainly going to vary based on your wrist size, etc. And Google does offer different bands that include hinges on the map, so there are ways to change the Watch 4's on-wrist feeling, albeit at a pretty penny. In my week or so with the Watch 4, it's not taken any major hits or bumps and still looks pretty good, but I think part of why people dislike this hardware design is just the worry that it's not going to stand up. It is IP68 rated and it does feel very sturdy. It also does have smooth surfaces and slick curves, so they might not inspire confidence with regards to long-term physical wear. And thanks to EU laws kicking in, Google has been forced to make this thing much more repairable, which is great news. With not much effort at all, you can now take this thing apart and access the battery, which is user replaceable. Honestly, brilliant news, and I hope to see more of this going forward, but I think Google could really do with making something just a little bit beefier. They don't have to replace the base Pixel 4, maybe call it an Ultra or something, like what Samsung and Apple make. And that shouldn't take away from the brilliant new screen we have on here, which is now curved, stretching closer to the very edges of the front glass. And this panel is now rated at 3000 nits, which is 50% brighter than last year's model. And that's something you absolutely notice. The display is much more readable in brighter environments or under studio lights, for example. It's a really well sorted panel, and this larger variant looks fantastic. You might have noticed Material 3 expressive elements in this video, and that's because the Watch 4 runs Wear OS 6 using Google's new design language. Honestly, I think it looks fantastic, really freshens up the experience, much like what M3E has done on the Fold side of things as well. This is maybe the biggest upgrade to the watch from a user experience standpoint, and I love the new design. Gemini is also built in here, which is fantastic and really contributes to making the ideal Google experience in a smartwatch. Though I will say it's not rapid, it doesn't run nearly as quickly as it does on the phone as you might expect, and unfortunately it doesn't currently link to the Fitbit app just yet. At the time of writing, Google is working on a Fitbit rebuild with Google Gemini built into it for asking about your fitness and health metrics, for example. Right now, if you ask about certain health metrics, it will just send you a general understanding, a general explanation of what those things are, not about your particular health metrics. And speaking of fitness and health tracking, the Watch 4, much like its predecessor, is really good. Despite the external hardware maybe not giving the impression of a hardcore sports watch, the multi-band GPS in here performed fantastically for me, even in my very tricky deep trail running spots where you're basically just blanketed by trees. And the data presented in the Fitbit app here compares quite nicely to what I had out on my Garmin, which I ran at the same time. It's not perfect, and there are still a few metrics missing from what Google records with the Fitbit app, but I think for many people, this is going to be more than enough data to run with, so to speak. I'm reluctant to go into crazy detail, just mainly because I know there's going to be a new Fitbit app on the horizon, and that might change things. But I will add that I am also using the premium version of the Fitbit app. It adds a few features, but I do not consider it a requirement if you buy a Pixel watch. So don't feel like you have to, go and spend $300-400 on a watch and then have to pay for the subscription. That is just not the case, and you will get basically everything you want from the free version of the Fitbit app. If you pony up an extra $100 on either version, you will get LTE connectivity, but with that comes satellite connectivity, the latter being useful for those who run ultras in the mountains or who might get stuck in the middle of nowhere and really need help. Again, not sure how many people are really going to partake in those activities and then go and buy a Pixel watch instead of something more dedicated, but the fact there's an option there is always great to see. Overall, the Pixel Watch 4 makes a very compelling case for the best Android watch on the whole. It has a great screen, solid performance, very good battery life, competent fitness and health tracking, and is priced well compared to its competition. Its design might be the biggest turnoff, and you know what, I totally get that, but if you're partial to a Pebble-like build, the Pixel Watch 4 matched with the Pixel 10 series this year is a serious combo. Guys, let me know what you think about this combo this year. Are you a fan, or are you more of a Samsung or OnePlus watch kind of person? Or maybe like me, you prefer a sports watch like a Garmin. So let me know in the comments what you think, and whilst you're down there, be sure to hit like if you enjoyed today's content and subscribe to never miss another upload. Thank you so much for watching. I've been Ryan Thomas, and I will catch you later. Cheers.